And this was a person who was so cranky the day before, right? And he said, he put his head up and he had that resting face the entire first day, that angry, I don't want to be here. You're an idiot. I hate everything you're saying, resting face. And so he raised his hand. He said this, he looks up at me and the entire room is looking at him, is dead silence. Right. And I said, go ahead. And then I see he's about to cry. This big, tough face. He said, yes.
How different would it be if the same thing started looking now like it wouldn't change if nothing else really did? Subscribe and hit this like button and share this with a friend. Hey, this is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. This is Christian D. Evans coming at you. I thank you so much for listening to this. We interview top-level 8- and 9-figure entrepreneurs, business owners, and CEOs that have either had an exit or they are actually running and scaling their business to that billion-dollar valuation. We've also interviewed top-level TEDx speakers as well as incredible psychologists, also a lot of wealth managers that manage $1 billion to $200 billion and more. We've had incredible guests like Sachin Kajarian, Cameron Herold, Jay Abraham, and so many others. So if you find this of value, then share this with a friend. And we really appreciate it. Guys, show our guests some love by liking this and subscribing. And guys, until next time, remember, be uncommon if you can, and enjoy the episode. Cheers. Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. I'm your host, as always, Christian D. Evans. Now, we always talk about leaders and, the magnificence of being a leader and being able to get the buy-in from your people and your culture and being that leader that's willing to sacrifice for your people and to be able to say, you know what, I am willing to discipline myself, and always the positive attributes. But also, we never really talk about the devastating situations sometimes. Those tough situations where it's like, okay, you know what? What's the least worst decision I have to make, right? Do I fire my best salesperson and take a loss in revenue, but you know what? I have to because that salesperson isn't ethical. Or maybe be in a situation where, you know what? Everything's tied up and you have to close your doors and you have to fire your best people. Definitely during this recession or whatever it may be. We as leaders, we are in those tough situations. So that's one of the reasons why I want to have this next guest on. She has speaking with top level CEOs of all different corporations and companies. She has worked with some very high level individuals in the government world. And she is a keynote speaker, interactive instructor, entrepreneur, Marine mom, leader, teacher, and so much. Please welcome my next guest, the one and only Abigail G. Manning. How are you doing today, Abigail?
I love the one and only. Thank you. Hi, Christian. How are you doing today?
I am doing excellent. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation because you have worked in so much. And one of the things in corporate events, national symposiums, galas, conferences, spoken in front of just amazing leaders in so many different, like I mentioned, in the military or, CE private world or the public world, whatever it is. And I want to let's start overarching a little bit. Okay, Abigail, you got a good heartbeat of what these leaders are facing every single day. And I want to just ask, let's just overarch. What do you see in our maybe one or two biggest things that are constant questions that they're coming up with or coming to ask you for?
Oh, great question. Thanks for asking. Yes, I do work with that level and I work with, the front office staff, right? So, and I see a lot of commonalities and it's mindset. So right now there's a lot of struggle internally, especially for the leaders at the higher level. We're supposed to look like we always know what we're doing. We're always supposed to be in charge. We're always supposed to have an answer. We have to make decisions with limited information. We have to make tough decisions, like you mentioned. Do we sacrifice today's financial income, which we need, but we also sabotage long-term culture if we don't fire that toxic person that you're referring to, especially if there's sexual harassment or any kind of assault. Those are types of topics I teach. I've taught for 5 years with Navy Command. And it's amazing the insights people have on the struggle. And what we try to do is help people lower the struggle, right? So there's no great one perfect decision, but you have to make a decision and you have to move on. You have to take as much information as you possibly have. You have to filter it through your own limiting life experiences. So we all come with a set of what is normal to us and what's our strength as a leader. So run it through that filter for sure. And then get some outside perspective on it. Get somebody who doesn't always agree with you. And that's really tough when you're at the top of the food chain, going to other colleagues and asking, hey, I'm not so sure about this decision. What else can you bring to the table? That is something that a lot of communication skills we're working on. One is mindset. How do you have the right mindset to do that, to look at problems, troubles, and obstacles and flip them into something positive? And then secondly, how do you communicate that? Not only internally in your own mind, but with the rest of your team and then with other colleagues who might be able to help.
You mentioned something here, and I want to sit on this for a second, because I think there's so many like competing beliefs sometimes as a leader. Yes, we need to be authoritative and make a decision, but also we need to be vulnerable and authentic. And it's almost like that's a competing belief. It's like, well, how do we do both at the same time, right? Because by being vulnerable and authentic, it's almost like showing your weakness a little bit, right? Or at least that's the belief. And so I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, vulnerability is a tricky word. I'll be honest, I don't really like the word vulnerability because it sounds like you're an open target, right? That's the mindset I've always had about vulnerability. You're standing out in the open, unprotected, and everybody's going to take their best shot. So if you know anything about my background, I came from childhood abuse. I came from domestic violence. I came from a lot of toxic bullets, physically and emotionally being thrown at me. So being vulnerable is extremely hard. So I don't even use that word because it feels unprotected. What I use is empowered. Because when I'm empowered and I am confident and I know in me and I believe in me and I'm asking for other people, because I certainly don't have all the answers. Nobody does. You're a fool and an egotist if you think you do. So I'm not that. I'm certainly not that end of the spectrum. And so I can stand up with confidence and say, hey, what am I missing? What am I not seeing? What other perspectives are there? And it's always something, even if it's a ridiculous solution or idea, right? You say, thank you for participating. Thank you for sharing that. What else do you have? Right? You take the information and you build people up so that they feel confident coming to you, because some of the ideas come from some of the strangest places. It might be someone overhearing an executive's idea or question in the boardroom, right? It might be a junior assistant. It might be someone walking down the hallway that you've worked with on a subcommittee. And it's amazing when you build that level of trust where people know they can come to you and they're going to be respected for their crazy, silly, out there, out of the, box thinking. Then you start building collaboration and people feel they can come to you, and people want to be trusted. People want to feel that you trust them. Right. And so to me, that's not vulnerability. That's empowering myself. That's empowering the team around me. It's empowering other people to think even more creative. And that doesn't feel vulnerable. That feels really strong.
You know what I find so interesting is definitely in the C-level suite. You also talk government officials, high-level officials, and you've worked with both. And so what's interesting is you're talking leaders leading leaders. And what I find so interesting, if you want to scale your business, you kind of have to attract internal leaders, right? That they can obviously take ownership, et cetera. And then you can, delegate that responsibility. But also sometimes there is that little tension. And tension, I know, is good, but it's also it's on a spectrum. And I want to just talk a little bit about this because in those boardrooms or in that executive suite or whatever it is, having those conversations nowadays, it's all Zoom. But my whole point is having those deep conversations, and there's competing arguments a little bit, and they've got both very good points, very good data. You as the leader, you have the final vote, et cetera. I want you to just maybe help us understand, maybe building out the right environment to make sure that it's more of a growing kind of leadership structure when you're having those conversations versus more of a destructive.
I love it. So there's some key communication languages you can do. We all know about body language, right? We all know, like, don't cross your arms, don't lean over other people, don't pace around the room and make everybody else sit, things like that in order to make yourself more of an equal at the table, let's just say. So there's check your body language, check yourself. I worked with an executive the other day, and as he said, his resting face, military resting face was not warm and welcoming, right? It was not like, tell me more. It was definitely like, I'm thinking I'm intense and I'm going to make you drop and give me 400 push-ups. And so I just literally held up a mirror so he could see what his resting face looks like. And I said, if you send a message, what does it look like if you're like, we need to talk? Instantly that can trigger people because we've all been through some things in our past. So that's part of my curriculum is purple threads. It's limiting personal thoughts based on past traumas that become physiologically tied in what we think, cognitive, say, communication, and do, behavioral skills. And so making sure that we're presenting ourselves in that way where it's an open environment, using words like yes and versus but, making sure we don't use language that's shame, blame, and judgment. Like, you should have already known this. How could you come to us with those ideas? Changing those. And it takes a little mental gymnastics. It takes a smarter person to put a little bit more effort in to take a negative. It's easy to rip people apart. That's easy. Anybody can do it, right? But that shuts people down. It doesn't create more positive. It doesn't create more communication and more brain solving and more problem solving. So someone may say, hey, instead of firing that guy, here's a program that I know really works. Could we try that first? And that's what we're really after, is coming together with unity to be able to look at each other. And when you know yourself and you know what you've been through, and you're able to have power and control over your own mind, over your own communication, and over your own behavior, then it's really easy to sit back in the room because you're not taking anything as a personal jab. You're not getting defensive over positions. You're able to listen. And part of the curriculum I teach is called Think, Say, Do, right? That cognitive communication behavior. And real fast, the check on that would be like times 2. So when you think, do it times 2 different perspectives. One is your own. You got where you got because of a lot of good traits, right? So pat yourself on the back, but also know you have limitations. So get an opposite perspective from yours. Get someone who thinks differently than you. If you're analytical, get someone who's creative in the room. So think twice from 2 perspectives. When you communicate, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen twice as much as you talk. You will gain so much information. You will also not lead the conversation down a path that everyone wants to follow the boss, right? So you're not leading the conversation in a direction that people will stifle their ideas. And the third is the behavior. And talking about twice, you got to double down. You got to double down. It is hard to be a leader. It takes a ton of effort. And so you just have to work twice as hard. In my book, right? The first idea doesn't work. You don't stop. You don't quit. Maybe you try it again, but reroute it, retry it, rewire it, get some additional information and try it again. But double down on your effort because it is hard. And with everything that companies have gone through with COVID and people not wanting to work, you said Zoom, every meeting is Zoom. That's really hard for a lot of people. Some of us are extroverts and we like a hug in person. We don't like this, hey, high five over the internet. But double down on your efforts and connecting with people.
You know, I love what you said, just those kind of those strategies a little bit. I was talking to one guy, and in regards to this, he was getting angry that one of his, C-suite, I think it was his, operations, they would come, but they would come only when it was a big situation, massive. And he's like, why can't we do things preventative? And I said, well, how did you react when they did at the beginning? He's like, well, I get frustrated, I get annoyed, like, just fix you, idiot, whatever. And the reality was like, well, because you're training them not to bring those small micro problems. And so you're getting frustrated and pissed off at them. And the reality is, well, now that's the reason why you're getting kind of the consequence of your decision, because now they're becoming huge and you're not being able to stop that situation beforehand. So that's why I think it's so important what you just mentioned and reiterate what you just said, because it's like, oh, we don't realize we're doing that sometimes as a leader, because you do just want that problem to be, solved, but also you'd rather, correct me if I'm wrong, you'd rather know those micro problems now, bring that up, but also bring the solution, but also making sure that when you respond, you respond appropriately. So it facilitates almost a more commutative situation. Is that correct, Abigail?
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I don't know if we're both correct or we're both, off the mark, but I completely agree with you. And I think that the solution, having people be able to know that they can come back to you with ideas, and that's trust. That's building trust when you can create that and that focus, and people know you're solution oriented. So here's an example. You have to know yourself. So before you can lead others, right, you have to lead yourself. And before you can lead organizations, you have to lead others. But then you first have to lead yourself. So the key to my work really goes back to those purple threads, those limiting personal thoughts. Let me give you an example about myself. It takes me a long time to get really angry, right? And when I do, I know why both my kids are Marines. Like, hell no, drop the gloves, here we go, right? I will try to find every solution possible and be super, super kind. And where is this person coming from? So recently in our company, one of my people did a charge. The company misrepresented themselves, and immediately she caught it. They were pretending they were SAM.gov, a government agency where you do bidding online, right? You put your curriculum out there. And immediately she realized it was false. So she said, you need to stop. You need to refund that credit card right now. And they said, oh no, we sent a check, da, 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 da. 6 months with battling with my credit card company, they are telling me, like, we have a letter from the Better Business Bureau that this company has gone out of business, that it's never a really functional business. We have all of this paper trail, right? And my credit card company that I've been with for over 20 years, I have 3 credit cards from my businesses. I have, 3 checking accounts, like all that kind of stuff, right? Loyal, great customer. They are telling me that I am the one at fault. The other company is the proper company doing the proper procedures, and that they refuse to refund the money. Christian, I got so upset on the phone with this person. I didn't swear, I didn't threaten, I didn't anything like that, but I was at a 9.5 out of 10. And I'm like, I'm going to terminate this conversation right now because I am not able to think logically. And I had to really go for a walk outside. And these are some of the tips I give. I had to breathe, I had to get outside, I had to get some exercise. And I was like, why in the world, 6 months of this? It's because it boiled down to being protected. My financial institution was supposed to protect me. Growing up with the type of trauma I did, the people that were supposed to protect and provide me betrayed me, hurt me, sabotaged me,
Wow.
with
Wow.
delight and pleasure. So the reason I got so upset was I was not protected. So, and then I could let it go. And then I was actually starting to laugh. So leadership, they have a lot of stress, health related problems, heart disease, heart attacks. I almost gave myself a heart attack over a credit card debt when it really had nothing to do with that. So as leaders, we try to say, okay, what is really at the root of the problem? So if you're in that room and you're getting upset and someone's really irritating you and agitating you, and you just can't see past their behavior, excuse yourself, do some of self-regulation techniques like we teach, and then figure out what that's tied to for you. Because then when we do, we can laugh about it and let it go, and we can all be healthier people. And then I can respond versus reacting. I can respond in a much better, healthier way for everyone involved.
Wow, what a great story. And I'm glad you just were vulnerable and authentic. This literally just recently happened because I think it's so important, not just, oh, yeah, I tell people how to do it, but also using that same structure and same processes to do that in your own life on something like you mentioned. And you mentioned here in regards to, feeling protective. And I find this actually very interesting because in today's culture, we see a big layoffs, and this is, it ebbs and flows. So it's not just now, it's been, previous as well, where there's been layoffs. And so I think the sentiment in today's culture a little bit regarding employees are they don't feel valued, right? And definitely my generation, it's like, hey, I want to be part of a company that's impact, that's doing something, that's part of something bigger than ourselves, right? And I want to just talk about like the psychology a little bit as the leader, because what I discovered is that, hey, we may say these are value company or these are our company values, but making sure that we instill them not just on the front end with our clients, right, and making sure that they feel valuable, but also culturally within our own organization, making sure you as the leader, like you just mentioned earlier on, hey, are you living by those own values? Because otherwise it's not going to flow out of you unless you are, instilling that. Is that correct?
Well, absolutely. If I can't be, and let's just use, for lack of a better word, for my book, vulnerability. If I can't be vulnerable, like, that wasn't scary for me to share that story because I owned it. Right. And I don't know anybody who's ever sat on a customer service line forever who didn't lose their cool. Right. I think pretty much everybody can check that box. And then we can see each other and say, oh, but now I see what it's tied to. And we learn so much faster through those stories. That's why in my speeches and my workshops, I do a lot of storytelling, because then instantly people can say, oh, I get that. That makes sense. And then how do you back it up? And how do you fix those? So when you're talking about building a culture, people are people, right? And so ask your people, what is it you want? What is it you need? What makes you are important to me? And then show them how you're important to them. Invest the time. We just had a newsletter that came out today, and it was at a USAFA, United States Air Force Academy football game. And I saw a cadet against a wall when I was going to the bathroom, and I took the stories in there if anybody wants to see it. And it's on LinkedIn, but took the effort and time to meet with somebody who, it makes such a difference when you invest your time. You make the eye contact. You don't look at your phone. You don't look at your watch. Are you okay? And when they say, yeah, 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 I'm good. You're like, that's great because, it's important to me that you're okay. Is there anything I can do? And then give them specifics. Would you like more flex time? Would you like more? And give them some ideas. And so they know that their idea will be accepted. You'll at least hear it and you can build the culture. So one of the things I do is just break it down to basic. We're just people. If you break it down to that simple fact, we all want to belong. We all want to have impact, as you said. We all want to be recognized for our unique talents from leadership all the way down. So find out from your people, what are those things that people want? To be recognized, to have pat on the back, to make more money. Because if you're throwing money at the solution, but that's not the motivating driver for your culture, and then being really clear on your culture. What do you stand for? And not this like 7-paragraph definition of our vision statement and our culture and our mission that the CEOs and everybody else can't tell you what it is. Like, so I try to make it simple. Like my culture is trust. Everything I work on is trust. And for me, that's an acronym. And how you do it is through truth, respect, unity, safety, and transparency. Trust. And those are the filters in which I make business decisions. So keep it simple and get to know and make sure that the people that are there follow that same vision that you have.
So what kind of systems or process? Because like you mentioned, I love what you said there: trust, truth, respect, unity, safety, transparency, and using that acronym. Now, I want to ask in regards to maybe just some of your team or maybe your communication, et cetera, because at times, if we get so busy, we don't realign ourselves, right? It's the same thing. The reason why we all work out almost every single day or take a shower every single day, we just allow ourselves to be realigned every single day or meditate, et cetera, right? There are certain things. So it's the same thing with this. If we just focus, okay, cool, wonderful, but then there's certain times, maybe it might be quarterly or weekly. So I want to kind of get into maybe like more of the, kind of the meat a little bit and say, okay, what does this look like in regards to maybe systems or processes, whether it's maybe corporate, whether it's public sector, whatever it is that you can build or integrate into your ecosystem so that it becomes a habit, a cadence.
And I'm not sure I quite understand. And partly because I liked the energy that you're giving. and and so I want to make sure I really answer the question. Can you tell me that again, maybe in a little bit of a different language?
Yeah, no worries. So like you mentioned trust, respect, unity, safety, transparency. The trust, right? That's what you really want to establish. So I'm curious in regards to maybe more communication, because obviously that's kind of how you filter a lot of your decisions. And I think that's as a company, whenever you get into XYZ projects or whatever, you have to filter them through your own values as well, right? So my
Right.
point is the way I guess is what I'm asking is with your team, making sure that that is also aligned for themselves, right? Hey, this is what we're doing. And it's more of like asking them. And this, I guess this is my question is like what I've done and a lot of my team is saying, hey, do you feel respected in this week? Do you feel unity with the whole team? Do you feel safety? Do you feel transparent? Do you feel like I've been transparent in sharing the numbers, et cetera, right? Certain questions that I'm able to ask to get, then I'm able to on kind of a spectrum, I'm able to identify, oh, you didn't feel respected. So what can I do to make sure you feel respected? Or what happened this week that didn't make you feel respected? Because then there's that communication, because again, in corporate or even government, there are certain times, like I mentioned, where you butt heads and you may have not have meant to do that as a leader, but they interpreted it that way. And so making sure that there's a clear communication, say, oh, Abigail, I apologize. I didn't mean for you to feel disrespected. So, hey, how can I approach that next time so you feel respected when I do share, hey, you did this wrong, right? Et cetera. Does that make sense? So that's basically what I'm just holistically asking.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. I thought you were going to go down a different path. So sometimes us creative dyslexic brains, we're like, oh, he's going to go here. And then you did it. And I was like, oh, gosh, no. Okay. Get back on the track. Where were we? So thank you. So yes. And I think part of it is changing it from a yes or no type of answer. Do you feel respected here? Yes. That's the end of the conversation. How do you feel respected here? Can you give me an example of how you were respected in this last week? How has your manager displayed trust in you? Where like
Ooh.
ask those kind of questions where you can get into a little bit more of the meat of it. And that's interesting. Like, so even if you don't agree, you're like, we just spent X amount of money on that project. And this person's saying it's not valuable. Say, okay, I understand it wasn't valuable. Why wasn't it valuable? Was it too long? Was it too short? Did you not like the instructor?
Right.
Was it too
Right.
confusing? Did you not have enough follow-up time afterwards? Versus, getting defensive and saying, do you realize how much money we spent on that program? You're ungrateful. And that's judgment, right? That's putting shame and blame and judgment on the other person. And so that person learns to shut down, be quiet, don't share. And you're never going to get the real truth from them. So learning how to get to the more meat and potatoes and more of the gravy and some of the side dishes and get a little bit more specific. Well, how for you? And building that up front and making it where I'd like off the record, just to have a conversation with you, or I'd like to just kind of get a couple ideas from you. Make it kind of casual, because if you're at the top rank and you're asking other people around you, they're nervous. So to me, an egotist wants you to be nervous. So one of the classes I teach is manipulations, right? Yay. It's to executive leaders. And it's, what do manipulators do? And I'm telling you, half the room, and I've been told, oh, that will never fly. Half the room either raises the hand and says, that's exactly how I was raised. And I saw all the executives above me acting and talking, moving the goalposts, right? Ghosting people. Yes, no, circus show. All the different ways I try to explain some of the ways that manipulations happen. A lot of the times it's because they just don't have better communication skills and they don't know what to do. So they feel kind of backed in a corner. They're supposed to know what to do. So they come out with this authoritative no, when they don't really mean no. They just don't want to look weak or dumb. Right. So we work past that and we help people become better, not only leaders, but what I love about the work I do, that's fabulous. But what I love is when I get that hand raised, that the second day of some of these workshops are 2 days long, some of them is, I need to start this meeting off. And I said, fine, you have the floor, go for it. And this was a person who was so cranky the day before. Right. And he said, he put his head up and he had that resting face the entire first day. That angry, I don't want to be here. You're an idiot. I hate everything you're saying. Resting face. And so he raised his hand. He said this, he looks up at me and the entire room is looking at him, is dead silence. Right. And I said, go ahead. And then I see he's about to cry. This big, tough face. He said, yesterday, all those things you described about manipulators and the way they communicate and how they think, that is me. And I go home and I am that way to my wife. I am that way to my daughters. I'm teaching my daughters. That's how men treat women. And he said, we had the most heartfelt discussion all night last night. I don't think I've ever cried like I did last night. And I wanted to
Wow.
apologize because I know I was being rude to you yesterday. I know you were calling on me to engage and I refused because I was about to cry the entire day.
Wow.
Everyone in that room shifted. No one thought he was the jerk anymore. Everyone told him how brave he was, how courageous he was. And since then, he has sent every single person that works for him through the workshop. But that's how transformative this is when you really look and own who you are and how you process. Like, what is your normal? Question your normal. How did I learn this normal? Where did it come from?
Mm.
And it is transformative what you can do, not only for your business, but yourself and also all the relationships around you. If you're a coach for your kids' football team, as a spouse, it's so powerful when people really do the personal growth and professional development work that stems at the root of behavior.
This is such powerful, powerful messaging. And I appreciate you sharing that story because I think it builds context in regards to what we all go through. But what's so beautiful, what he did is he humbled himself so much because you were speaking directly to him. And he's like, you know what, I realize this and I don't want to be that way. And he changed. That I bet that was a serendipitous moment for you, Abigail. I bet that was awesome.
Yeah,
Uh,
because I'll be honest, I went back to the hotel room that first night and I thought, I can't reach this guy. What am I doing? Like, I'm good at reaching people, understanding people, having people be able to express things that they've never told anybody. I've all the time I get told, hey, I've never told anybody, or would this be, a negative trait? And they share something. And so I went back with more self-doubt because we do that, right? As
yeah.
leaders, even though you know better, you're tired, you don't eat a great dinner, you're sleeping in a different hotel room, it's noisy, I'm not sleeping well. Your go fight win is compromised when you don't take care of what I call the foundational 8, how you sleep, your nutrition, your water, your health, all of that. Then I went back the next day, not having the same go fight win until he spoke. And then he felt comfortable being able to do that with his team. And it made a very different, and he's a big physical guy who would be very imposing. And he said, follow up again. I always love following up with people 6 months later. He's like, I cannot believe how much more people are coming and talking to me about what they want in leadership, what they want in culture, what I'm doing well. And then he takes it the step we want. And what am I not doing well? Right. And that's a yikes moment. But when you do that, it builds trust. It builds unity. It builds that safety that you can share that with me. That's how it builds those things versus making a leader look weak and soft.
I love this. I think this is such a good, I'm taking notes over here, and I hope a lot of our audience are taking notes as well. And I'm curious, I want to kind of dive into just a little bit here in regards to specifically unity. Now, I always find this word very interesting because, see, and again, I always love these competing situations. We want a diverse team because everybody is really good at certain personality, and you need an HR manager, et cetera. You need someone that's, chief revenue officer. That's kind of, a different personality, and you need someone that's more of like CMO for a different personality, et cetera. But with all those personalities, you have some sort of diversity, which is beautiful, right? We do want that, but also it almost prevents unity. Now, it doesn't mean it's not, I'm not saying that. There are unifying things that we could all establish, right? Big goals, dreams, et cetera, right? That we all can get across. But what I'm basically saying is I'm just visualizing this specifically where, hey, you know what? I've got the chief of staff. I'm the president of the United States of America. I got secretary of defense. And these are top leaders, right? And we're sitting here, we're having this deep conversation. What should we do with, and let's just name this because it's just most recent, Ukraine or Russia, whatever. And everybody's got conflicting situations. And then you as the president, you have to make a decision of choice, right? And it's, I'm talking even top CEOs, top leaders, top whatever, right? And you have to make a choice. You get all your top leaders data, cool, wonderful. And then what happens is you have to make a choice, and what that's going to do is going to piss off some of the people, right? Because they suggested something different, and you went with, option B. My question then is, as the leader, okay, I went with option B, but how do I make sure and maybe communicate properly to say, hey, you know what? I want to make sure everybody's in agreement. We may not be holistically agreed on the journey or the path or whatever, but I want to make sure now that, hey, because I made a choice, we are all in agreement, and there's not this maliciousness, and making sure that there is still that clear communication, how to properly handle that afterwards. Because I think that's a good question, and we have to anticipate that not everybody's going to be in agreement in that, but how to get that buy-in later on.
I love it. I love it. Maliciousness. That is a great word that we use and when we talk about manipulations, right? And maliciousness, like vendetta, getting back, getting even, the score, right? So one of the things about building unity is language. I go back to language a lot. So that's the second. Think, say, do, right? Say is communication. Language is super important. All right, team. What are our, pause for dramatic effect, goals? And then John over there is like, well, Larry never listens to me and stuff. Okay, time out. We're only productive, setting ground rules, having healthy boundary lines, having established culture, right? So my son is Marine Intel, 4 years deployed with infantry. Okay, working out, swearing, cussing all the time. He's kind of top dog because he's the Intel guy, He got promoted and he's now at Cyberspace Command, Joint Forces outside of DC. He goes and they're like, what's your, PFT score? And he's like, yeah, it's pretty bad. And he tells this group, this culture, the other, I don't know if people can see us, but I'm pointing to my other hand, the other culture, that what it is. And they're like, you're a rock star, man. We have it's just such a different culture. No one swears. You can't wear old camis. You have to wear fresh ironed crisp camis. Like, he's like, they're camis. Like, the culture is so different. And so how do you create that unity within those cultures, right? So you have to assimilate within the environment around you. So make sure the group you're talking to, you understand the culture. You set the ground rules. You say, this is accepted here. This is not accepted here, right? So like foul language in infantry is a given. If you don't do it, you don't fit in. At the other place, like, you do that and you're kicked out. So like setting clear boundary lines on how we're going to communicate with one another. What are the expectations of each other? How do we treat each other? Who speaks up? Like, establishing that so you can be efficient. And it's always we, our, but you speak with authority too. And then you go around the room and you say, all right, Christian, the pro that you gave is this. Love it. I think we're going to table that and use that in a future project and a future program. Then you go around and you recognize people, and you can do it super, super fast. And you give them a reason why it was good. And you say, at the end of the day, guys, I have to come down with one decision, but it's our decision to back that up. You remind them of the culture.
Oh, wow. I like
And you
that.
say,
I like
and here's how we're going to move forward. And then we can reassess in 6 months. We can reassess in 6 years. We can reassess when. But you let everybody be seen, understood, heard. You hold the reins on that wild Mustang about culture and what's going to be accepted in that room. And then you confidently acknowledge people. And if someone starts ripping someone apart, you say, that's not what we do here, people. That's not what we do. If you want to be constructive, yes. Tell us why that won't work. I'm not the scientist. You are. You tell me why that project won't work. Right. And then at the end of the day, it's not my problem if I make people mad. It's not my problem if they're upset and angry. That's theirs to own. If I'm doing my job and I'm treating people with respect, and I'm being truthful and I'm being transparent, and they go away and they're mad at me, I don't have shoulders big enough to carry all that. That's theirs to own. It's not mine to own.
This, oh my gosh, that was beautiful what you just mentioned. And I love what you said, because see, like you mentioned, hey, it's acknowledging, hey, you did a great job. I love your data points in that, but still not totally disregarding. The reason why I love what you said is because even though people are like, oh yeah, that makes sense, but we don't deploy it in our C-suite or our top leaders. We think, oh, they're big enough. They're put emotion aside, we're not doing that. That's stupid, and they move on. And the reality of what you just mentioned, that communication, at the end of the day, people are people. It doesn't matter what rank they have. At the end of the day, people are still people, and you treat them in that regard, because they just want to feel valued, respected, just like you mentioned. But also the unifying process. I love what you said. Hey, this is our decision. It's not just mine. I have to make it, but it's our decision. Then everybody's like, yeah, we want to make sure that we're going to win this, but whatever it is. So beautiful, beautiful analysis in that regard. Now, I'm curious. I want to talk a little bit about humility in this, because as you rise the ranks and as you become more successful, and I've talked to some really, really remarkable people, and you've talked to some amazing, amazing people. And I always find it so interesting. You can always it's an intuition a little bit. You can identify, hey, this person's very humble, or this person's a little bit more cocky. And, I want to talk a little bit about the importance of humility in leadership. There's a confidence, but it's a humble confidence. So I'd love for you to just maybe share your thoughts on that, and making sure that we're aligning ourselves and becoming aware, definitely as our listeners and ourselves, facilitate growth in our life. And we want to be those leaders, but humbly.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. It's the same as vulnerability, right? Like, what is humble and how do you do it successfully? We're not really taught how to be humble. So some of us are taught you're not great. Anything you do is dumb. Even a blind man can hit a baseball once in a while, stuff like that. So like, who would I then come out and say, I am awesome, I am great? Until you do your self-work, until you say, hey, I've learned some things the hard way and I'd like to share it. That is a humble perspective versus I am amazing. I am fantastic. I have all the answers. Follow me, people. Right? That's egotistical and that's ridiculous. And no one wants to follow a know-it-all. I mean, it really comes down to like grade school playground behavior. No one wants to follow the bully, right? And no one wants to follow the smarty pants know-it-all who tells you exactly what you're doing wrong at hopscotch or whatever they play, So being humble means you're just comfortable in your skin. And you don't always have to have the floor. That he'll, hear twice as much as you talk. You don't always have to have the floor. You don't always have to have domination. You can empower people by saying, you know what? I probably would have gone this direction, but I like how you're thinking. And I did put you in charge. Run with it and come back to me at any time. If you feel like you want extra input or it's not going like you expected, that's okay. Mistakes are okay. And here's how I made a mistake and I learned from it. I floundered and then you tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
But what I learned from it in that floundering around was that I really didn't want to do online webinars. I just learned that wasn't in my wheelhouse. So it was a really good thing that I took away from it. So the bottom line, and then bottom line it for people as leadership, sometimes people need you to bottom line it. So the bottom line is failures aren't failures. They're learning opportunities to adjust your course. So I expect you to come to me with opportunities where you're like, I need a course adjustment and I'm not sure what to do. So I expect you to come to me with that. And that's how you build humility. I love, so I know you're Air Force veteran, right? Aren't
Yes.
you?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay. So I work a lot with military and veterans. And I last night got connected with someone. I reached out to him. Someone said, you need to meet this person. And he's a Marine veteran and he runs a ranch and he does this stuff. Right. And so we all have these limiting beliefs. And so I thought, oh, neat, how interesting. And I read through his bio. Oh, and by the way, he's got his MBA from Cornell University and he da 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 da. And I started laughing because that was the last little line at the very bottom. And I thought to me, what a humble guy. What a humble guy. And it made me like him. I could trust him because he wasn't all flash and stickers and sirens and bells and whistles going off. I could trust him that he could back up what he was going to say and he wasn't going to jump out in front and say a lot of words, but then not do the hard work and not do the actions. And I think that's what humility is that you will roll up your sleeves and you will do the hard work alongside or in front. They see you working just as hard, if not harder than them. And the vision that you have and how you hold on to it and how you invest in your own mental health and well-being, right? And then they're going to do the same. And to me, that's a humble leader is someone says, I'd like to know more versus I'm going to tell you more.
So well said. So well. And that's why I think it's so fun to talk a little bit about this, because we have seen in today's culture, I don't know. At least I've talked to some where it's very confident, but it just comes across very, very cocky, and it's very unattractive. And it's so beautiful because some of the most successful people I've had on my podcast, like yourself, even, it's just that you come across very humbly. And then I'm looking at even when we got connected, I'm like, oh my gosh, all this speaking, all this stuff. And I'm like, I can learn a little bit. I'm like, this is awesome. And it's just fun because that's what I love. It's almost like this beautiful like relationship. Like, wow, I love that. But also, like you mentioned, we're not really taught this. How do we exemplify this? How do we be able to unpack this ourselves? And then, like you mentioned, it's like, hey, making sure that we're very comfortable with who we are. Because if we understand if we're not comfortable with who we are, we show up differently, try to overcome our lack of XYZ, whatever it is, fill in the blank. I want to ask you this, Abigail, in regards to, we've always heard, and I was talking to someone, where we want to increase our strengths. We have to identify unpacking our own strengths and our weaknesses.
Mhm.
And we obviously want to dial as leaders in, okay, you know what, these are our strengths, this is what we're really good at, and then find people that can obviously fill in those weaknesses. But I was listening to someone the other day, and he's like, I still want to increase my weaknesses, though. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to at all like engage them and work on them. I may not be the most disciplined XYZ, whatever it is, but I still want to work on my weaknesses. And I thought that was a really cool approach, because I just thought it was a really unique kind of orthodox. I wanted to get your approach on that. Definitely working with some top level C-suite business owners, as well as public officials.
I love it. Well, okay. So, me, I'm going to take it back to limited thinking, right? So limited thinking means I'm good at this. I'm only good at this. This is my wheelhouse. I will stay in my lane. That lane starts getting smaller and smaller, and your world starts getting smaller and smaller the higher you go up the corporate ladder or the executive ladder, right? And so we start telling our brain that we are only good at A. That's it. There's a whole alphabet, but we are only good at A. And it's subconscious, but it sneaks in and the brain will believe what you tell it. That's why I always start with everything with think. What do you think? How are you thinking? And that's going to be reflective of what your gut feeling and your decisions are going to be. So if you eliminate the limiting thinking and you get that brain, like, I could try new things, I could do different things, I could become an artist, I could write that book, I could learn Japanese. It creates a brain that's a growth mindset brain. Neuroplasticity is where if you don't use those neural pathways, they die. They get frozen out, right? So let's keep them firing. Let's work on the things that make you uncomfortable. Let's work on the things that you think are quote unquote too hard for you. It doesn't mean you have to be an expert in it, but at least when you go to Japan, then you can at least say hello and thank you, right? And you can at least say 4 sentences, and maybe they're so bad that people are politely kind of laughing, but they can tell you're trying. That's me in foreign language. I would love to be fluent, but I still try. I don't say I'm bad at it and then go and be, the loud, just speak louder because they don't understand me. I can laugh at myself because I know I'm butchering their language. I'm like, so sorry. So sorry. Like, but it keeps my brain open. And when I keep my brain open as a business leader and helping other business leaders, you start seeing other solutions. You start seeing other ideas. It's endless. It's building optimism that the closed mindset doesn't. So the goal isn't necessarily, if you're going to start running, to run a marathon, although I've done that under limiting beliefs. I said I wasn't a runner, so there's a whole story there, but yeah, I've done a couple. Is find where you're telling yourself you can't do something, you're not good at something, and then just go and try it. And that's how you build humility too. If you've been really great at tennis and now you're trying downhill skiing, you're going to have some humility handed to you.
Yeah.
And then you can remember what maybe some other people are going through, some of your younger executives, some of the people on your team. You can remember how dumb and bad and awkward you felt falling down that ski slope, right? And you can translate it to that. And then you can have more humility. You can have more kindness. You can open up that conversation. You could use it as an example in your conversation with people.
Such great wisdom. And Abigail, I really just appreciate you being on today and just unpacking this at a very high level. And we've talked about a lot of different subjects and conversations, but really deep. And I know our listeners, because I took a lot of notes, I know our listeners want to know more about, how to get be part of your ecosystem, learn from you, be part of what you got going on. So please tell me, how can my audience reach out to you, Abigail?
Oh, thank you, Christian. And I have a whole page of notes over here too from your conversations and your notes. And I think that's when my brain got sidetracked. So yeah, I would love for people to reach out for more information. And if I'm a good fit, fabulous. If not, I know wonderful people that I've been able to connect with that I can get you into someone else, perhaps. Like it's all about connecting each other and building a better world. And so they can find me at abigailgmanning.com. They can find me on LinkedIn. You have to have the G in the middle. Otherwise you get Peyton Manning's sister-in-law. And I don't think she'd appreciate you reaching out about keynote speaking and workshops. But I love meeting people and I love learning from them. And I'm always developing new content that's custom tailored towards specific needs. But I have a curriculum that's out there. And we have a free newsletter if people want to sign up for it. I get a lot of feedback. I love when the newsletter goes out because I get a lot of emails back telling me some positive things about it. And that always feels good, right? So, and also compliment the other leaders around you, people who you looked up to. That would be my one other thing I thought of just now is like, tell people thank you. Like, thank you, Christian, for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for your enthusiasm. Thank you for letting me share my voice and being kind about it, saying you learned things. That makes me feel really good. And I definitely learned from you, and I'd love to hear from your listeners.
Definitely. And guys, those links will be in the description below. So make sure you stop what you're doing. That's abigailgmanning.com. And she is really big on LinkedIn. So make sure you just communicate with her and engage with her stuff. She's got a lot of fun resources out there. So make sure you stop what you're doing. Tell your team, mention this to your team as well and share that over. Abigail, again, I really appreciate you just being on and, just very excited about, kind of where you're going and the impact you're making in people's lives. Now, I always love to ask my guests before I let you go, is there any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience?
Be kind to yourself. Leadership is hard. It is hard. And catch yourself in any negative self-talk. And replace it with something very kind. If you want, imagine I'm sitting across the room for you and saying, well, I don't quite see it that way. I see that you're making headway, because when you're at the top of the iceberg, you're also the whole bottom of it. You're working late at night, you're stressed, you're worried. There's financial commitments. It's hard. Cut yourself some slack and be kind to yourself.
Very well said. That is my friend, the one and only keynote speaker, interactive instructor, and entrepreneur, Abigail G. Manning. Guys, that is Journey with Christian Evans podcast. Until next time, be uncommon if you can. Yo, this is Christian D. Evans, Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. We thank you so much for listening to this amazing episode. If you feel and you know that this was valuable to you, please show some love to our amazing guest by liking this, by commenting on this, by making sure that you do a nice 5-star review and just show some love to our guest. That'd be really awesome. Also, make sure you share this with a friend, a family, a colleague, someone that you believe would bring value to their life right now. And guys, we just want to say thank you again for just being part of our community. If you want to have more resources, don't be afraid. Go to christiandeevans.com. You can actually schedule a phone call with me, or you can send me an email at christian.evans@beUncommonIfYouCan.com. That's christian.evans@beUncommonIfYouCan.com. Always love to hear some feedback and let me know what is the number 1 or 2 things that you are struggling in your business and your life, and we'll make sure we have those conversations. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast, and until next time, remember, be uncommon if you can. Cheers.